Hey, what's going on, everybody? Steve here, Rake and Profit. Today, we are joined by my friend David Wosick, who started his business with Wholesale on Amazon back in 2014. This October of 2022, it's going to be 8 years that he's been running a wholesale business on Amazon. So today, we're going to share how he's literally started from scratch, not knowing anything about wholesale, and he is on pace, I believe, to do 11 million this year. He says his goals are to double within the next year and possibly even triple. So these are crazy, crazy goals. He's really hit some amazing milestones. I mean, that's crazy, man, doing over 1 million a month. So we're going to talk about how he did it, how he got started. We're really going to focus on a lot of the beginner stuff, getting started, why wholesale, sharing the ups, the downs, the wins, the losses, the good and the bad. And I'm just really excited to have David here. And what's even more impressive is David has now built his business to the point where he was sharing behind the scenes. He's really only spending about 10 hours a week. And he has an addiction to watching, what was that show? Ozark?
Ozark, yeah.
So he's crushing his Netflix during the day now. And he's putting a lot of work to this business. So we're going to cover it all. But what's going on, man? How you doing, David?
Not much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, things are well, and yeah, appreciate this.
Yeah, last time I had you on, I had David on the channel, I think could have been 2 or 3 years ago.
It was a while ago for sure.
For sure, man. And I believe at that time you were at around, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was around 7 million a year.
Yeah, I think it was, just under 7. It was like 6.5, I want to say. So, yeah.
So that's pretty impressive, man. I mean, that's, almost like a 50% jump, which is pretty nice, man. And, I'm not going to go into your personal stuff, but you've got some big deals going on behind the scenes where the next year could be huge as well. So it's a privilege to have you here. But how did this all start, man? Share with people, because there's a lot of people watching who they're selling on eBay, they're flipping stuff, retail arbitrage, online arbitrage. They want to be able to build more consistent income. We all want to be able to, put in work once and be able to reap the rewards over and over again. But a lot of times, myself, my mom included, who sells books on Amazon, we're always having to chase that next deal. And a lot of people who do wholesale, they always talk about, the great thing is you build one relationship, or you get a great distributor, or you build a relationship with a brand, you get a wholesale account, and you can just continue to make money off of that one deal, that one piece of hard work that you put in. So talk a little bit about how you got started, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story is a lot of kind of what you're speaking to with the arbitrage type model. And so when I started, I don't even know how I found it. I don't remember, but it was basically like a drop shipping course. It was, I think it was almost like an ebook. So it was very light, relatively, cheap, if you will. It was like $29, that sort of thing. And so what I learned was, okay, hey, you can drop ship into eBay through just a myriad of online stores and or offline stores, so brick and mortar. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting. So I went through it, and then I basically started, in essence, scouring for, and I don't remember what the parameters were on eBay, looking for opportunities. And then from there, I would say, okay, this one seems to be selling, or this line of products are selling, what have you. And then I would go out and scrub the internet to find that product. And then from there, from there, I was able to, add in my fees and all that fun stuff. And so I would just put up an eBay listing and get a sale. And I remember the very first sale was an absolute disaster. And this just goes to show the evolution, but it was for an aquarium. So of course, an aquarium it's all glass, right? So you can imagine where this is going. And so I got my first sale. I remember exactly where I was at. It was with my girlfriend and my wife at the time. And I had this cha-ching on my phone. I'm like, what is that? I had no idea. And sure enough, I sold it. And like at that point on, I'm like, I want to do this. And, and my background, my background's in e-commerce. So I've always loved the idea of the kind of the shopping cart, the commerce, purchasing things on the internet. So that was really fascinating to me. So I'm like, oh my God, this is it. And at that point on, it was just a weird tunnel vision moment where I'm like, this is what I want to do. I'm like, this worked. And this is like just super easy. And at the same time, I was one of those guys that, if I want a North Face jacket, I'm not going to go to the North Face store or northface.com and pay whatever they're charging. I'm going to go and find like an overstock deal somewhere for myself, for personal. So I love the idea of trying to find good deals, and then whether for myself and now for this was trying to find, for others to purchase. But what I was finding through all this is that, okay, people were buying this, and I'm like, I could have found this. It's just people are all about convenience, which is where we are now as a world, right? They want that on your doorstep, that product, that delivery, that shipment. So I ultimately I sold this aquarium, and it arrived, and immediately I got a message from the buyer that said, "Hey, here's some pictures. This thing came shattered." And I was like, "Oh." So I literally paid. I got a new one, and thankfully it was fine. It wasn't damaged. And then, so that was a loss. I mean, I actually had to pay for the product again, refund, all that fun stuff. And so I actually like I said, ended up paying for it. Um, so as I was progressing through this, I was starting to find trends where I'm like, okay, I'm selling 10 of these things, and I'm just going through the same medium, like finding an online store, the same online store. So I just kind of thought about, like, and I didn't know the idea of wholesale, like what even wholesale meant, right? Like I understood wholesale and distribution and retail, like what do all those concepts mean? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to see if I can find the source, because this is going through so many hands by the time it actually gets to the consumer that everyone's taking their cut, right? So obviously eBay would take their cut. Whatever online store I bought it from would take their cut. And so as I progressed through kind of this online arbitrage, and truthfully, I did a little bit of the kind of the brick and mortar store, but always left online because, like I said, just convenient. And I was living in an urban area, so it was just made sense for me to do it that way. But I started finding this, multiple 10, 20, I sold 20 of these things, what have you. I'm like, okay, well, what if I went to the source? And so that's when I started to kind of figure out, all right, well, this is ultimately what wholesaling is. And so then ultimately what ended up happening is I stumbled upon a course called the Wholesale Formula. And I did my research. I was very thorough with my research, and it was one of those things where there were multiple different types of courses out there, but I trusted the content. I trusted everything that was. I was on the list, so I was sent emails and such, and so it kind of began to trust what was being sent, the content, and I was really learning. And so what ended up happening is I was looking to get what was a course that was offered, and really the course wasn't available. And so I was put on a list, and as I progressed, nothing happened. Still was doing what I was doing, but I was like, if I really want to be good at something, I want to learn how to do it. I want to be able to be proficient at it, and I want to learn. I don't want to try to, sure, you learn on your own, but there's a point where, like, okay, you need to find someone that's experienced, who's been doing it, and learn from them. So more of a, like I said, a mentorship, coaching, that sort of thing. So it made sense to me. And, in my own personal career at the time, I was very much at the pinnacle of my career with what I was doing. I've learned over, decades of being in this career. And so I basically got an email saying, hey, there's at that time, it was like a class, but it was a weekend type session. I was actually during the week, but it was like a session. It was a 3-day session. Learn how to wholesale, actually see how we're doing it. And I'm like, okay, well, learn by example, learn by exactly what's happening, not above and beyond a course, which in itself is obviously would be valuable. So I was like, okay, I just wanted the course, but I'm like, let me look into this. And I started looking into this, and it was a very limited, it was a small amount amount of people. So it was a very kind of, I'm going to call it VIP, but I guess you call it VIP. And so I remember telling my boss, I'm like, hey, look, I know this is short notice, but I need to get out of here. And he was very entrepreneurial himself. So we were on the same page there. He's like, hey, look, I know it's a short notice. I remember I had some things that were pressing at work, some due dates, some projects. And he's like, all right, go ahead. He understood. And so I spent 3 days learning about wholesaling. And so I learned, but then also was able to understand the inner workings of it. So that was really beneficial, really helpful. And that was, again, we're probably, so that was, I'm in year 8, right? So 2014, to kind of give a timeline, 2014 to the end of 15, right around Thanksgiving is when, at that time, she was now my fiance. So we were planning a wedding and all that fun stuff. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to give my notice. So what ended up happening is kind of halfway, I wouldn't say halfway, about 3 months of doing this on my own, kind of self-taught, and then latching on to what was the wholesale form of this offering. For me, it was, almost 9 months after, 8 months after, I want to say, where I was like, hey, I've got kind of parity with my career salary, if you will, where I'm like, okay, I can take the leap and spend all my time in doing this every single day and kind of fulfill my own personal dreams. Right. So I remember I was right around Thanksgiving. I'm like, hey, beginning of the year, I'm going to give my notice, and I'm going to do it. And that's when I actually left. It was, beginning of 16 is when I left my full-time job and have been doing it full-time ever since. But, from the inner workings of how bad this ended up, like how bad I wanted this ultimately was, at this conference, this 3-day conference, let's call it, when we had breaks, I would go in and reach out to vendors to open up wholesale accounts. Cause I was that eager and Steve, we've talked here and there, but I'm a pretty reclusive guy. I'm not a social butterfly. I usually stick to the wall, if you will, at parties and such. It's just not my style, but I was kind of had this, whatever it takes mentality. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. I was excited. It was working, and it was working based on my own kind of self-driven, learning or what have you. So I didn't even have any kind of formal training. And so once I kind of immersed myself in it, it was just a springboard into being able to leave the 9-to-5 gig, if you will, and kind of do this and set out to do this full time. And like I said, that was in 16, and it's 5 years, 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. And so through all that, all I cared about was making pretty close to what I was making at salary, because I was still having to find time, kind of as what started as a hobby that just blew up. But I'm like, okay, well, if I can spend double my time over the course of a week, I'm pretty confident I can make up what I've, may not have hit parity and from a salary standpoint. Right. So kind of had that all planned out, but yeah, so from that point on, just a normal coming full circle with the business where, grew. It wasn't me. It wasn't kind of a one man show. I had some other kind of international employees, virtual assistants, that sort of thing. So that was kind of taught on how to utilize that through the course, if you will. And then from there, started hiring domestically and just built an organization like any other company, where you just hire for your needs and such, and kind of learning, what I'm good at, what I need work with, and what someone else would be better at me than, like sales, for example. So that sort of thing. So that just kind of evolved and so just, we're fresh off of 2021. We hit like 11.4, I want to say, million this year. And this year is going to be 2022 is going to be probably pretty doggone close to double that, which is just doesn't, kind of pinch yourself, doesn't make sense. But that's just, there's just honestly just commitment and staying with it and staying focused. And, to your point, I'm as we're growing, it doesn't necessarily mean like my lack of bandwidth is growing, or I'm busier. It's actually quite the opposite. Like everything's kind of gotten to a point where it's matured, a little bit more fine tuned. So so I'm able to do some Netflix binging during the day, and then at night, when the kind of the day's over, dinner's being served, I'm completely free, and there's nothing. There's just spending time with my family, and then I can, like I said, during the day, focus on. And I'm really getting involved with like health and fitness and that sort of thing. So really committing my time to things that I want to do personally, because I kind of have that time freedom now. So
What are your thoughts, David? And thanks for sharing. What are your
yeah,
thoughts
of
on
course.
people starting this in 2022? Because you started in 2014, and a lot of people, they worry about anytime they start anything new, whether it's drop shipping or even, I teach people how to sell books and go to thrift stores.
Mhm.
You wouldn't believe on social media how many people say you can't make money doing that. It doesn't work. There's too much competition. Yet every single time I go out, I make money. Um, how do you feel about wholesale in 2022? Is it harder? Is it easier? Can people still do it? Is it still a good opportunity? Because we've interviewed a lot of people who are part of TWF who are doing wholesale, friends of mine, and everybody loves it. Everybody thinks it's trending. It's obviously not as easy to get started as thrifting. It does take more money. It takes more experience. But what is your
Sure.
honest opinion? Because you're probably the one doing the most sales out of anybody I've talked to. So
Mhm.
like on a bigger scale, what are your thoughts for like the new people? Can they come in and compete with guys like you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get it. I get and I'll give you a perfect example. Um, Bitcoin, right? Everyone's it's is it not say that it's saturated because it's more of a market, right? But like, did I not get in early enough? And um, I'm saying this as someone that I have yet to do a single thing with Bitcoin. It's on my list, and some folks may be shaking their head. It's too late, but at the same time, I think so. I talk to draws of people who are looking to do wholesale and such. And I think the biggest thing, so for me, um, there's the difference between okay, doing this as a hobby or looking at it as, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this as a hobby, and if it turns into something greater, great. Or I don't want this to be something greater. I like this as a hobby. It's a nice passive income opportunity, that sort of thing. Where well, maybe not passive, you do some work, but it's just something I want to do. Like I said, just to have some side hustle, some side income, that sort of thing. And I think that's where the difference was, is when I was doing arbitrage, I'm like, this isn't sustainable. And I was looking for something that was sustainable because, I didn't hate my job. It wasn't like a pure, a disgust type thing. It was just the fact of like, I entrepreneurial was just in my DNA. I wanted to do something on my own, and that was that. And so for me, wholesale to that degree was something that was more than just being. It was sustainable, but it was also very opportunistic. So fast forward to today, I don't think that has changed. Um, we all know Amazon. We all know that this massive marketplace, right? And it's ever growing and evolving. Um, However, what you'll find is ever since and this is only because I'm living proof, the company's living proof in that, is that ever since the pandemic hit, brands that we speak to or brands that we've have kind of talked to in passing or whatever that may be, we're a little apprehensive about Amazon, selling on Amazon. So what we found is the um, the opportunity for a brand to sell on Amazon has ever increased because of the pandemic. Because it's like, okay, well, everyone's wanting to shop, and I'm not talking about the outliers. I'm talking about the people that are just now are even more affirmed into what shopping online is, right? The outliers, they came in just because they couldn't go to stores. So what that brought on is even more opportunity for brands that sell on Amazon, and just I guess for lack of better words, the desire for more consumption. because these brands are now kind of ridding themselves, if you will, of not necessarily brick and mortar stores, but it's just a shift of moving into e-commerce. And so what we're finding is brands that we've talked to maybe like 2 years ago are like, hey, we're looking to maybe develop an Amazon strategy, or we're looking to sell online. Are you open for opportunity to talk, what have you? So, to kind of roundabout answer your question, Steve, is that it absolutely is still ripe for opportunity. I talk to, have worked with all shapes and sizes of folks just starting out, and the biggest difference, and that's with anything, whether you're buying a course on fitness and going to the gym, whatever it is you're going to get started. You're going to have a ton of energy. You're going to be thrilled to get going, and then you're going to hit a snag, and then that's where the doubt's going to creep in. All those things are going to happen. And the folks that I talk to, starting with just, let's call a single wholesale account, right? And they want to have 4, 5, 6, 10 wholesale accounts by the end of the year, let's say, is they saw through that snag, and they saw on the other side. It's like, okay, this is going to happen, and this is what I need to kind of start to build myself up for and callous myself for, to kind of withstand some of those thoughts, those fleeting thoughts or whatever's passing, in the sense of like, hey, I can't do this, or I got turned down, whatever that may be. And that's really the difference that I've noticed every single time, in the sense of like, okay, yeah, you're going to hit a bump. I've hit umpteen bumps, and I'm happy to talk about any one of them. And so it's just on the other side of that bump, right? Getting past that point and pushing forward. And then that's when you kind of start to see, okay, but just like, for prime example, when you work out, you're super sore. You first start out, you're so sore, like, you take 2 days off, 3 days off, then you don't go back. And it's like, okay, I've got to push through, right? I got to push through being sore, and I got to work out because it's Tuesday. I'm sore. Maybe it's an off day, but I can't take off Wednesday, even though I'm still going to be sore. I've got to keep going and start to build that as part of your routine. And it's the same thing with anything else, a business, or like I said, working out, because I know it's that and like dieting, right? Those are kind of the touchy subjects, if you will. So ultimately, what I think it really comes down to is just the perseverance. That is unequivocally going to make you succeed, because I'm sitting here, we're succeeding, we're growing like crazy, and it's not because it's just because we're sticking with it. I've had moments in over the past 7.5 years now, where it was like, oh man, I'm not getting any accounts. What's going on? And like I said, it's just pushing through, and understand this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Thanks for that. Would you say it's best for new people who are starting wholesale? Again, I'd recommend, guys, I'm going to put some free resources down below. There's actually a free training that the Wholesale Formula is putting on, a webinar. I'll put that down below, and I'll share some of my favorite blog posts that they've posted, because I've learned a lot from the guys at TWF as well. And I've interviewed a ton of people. So check out those free resources. But what would you say? I know you do some coaching within TWF as well, and you help a lot of new students.
Yeah.
What can people expect when they land their first account? Like, I know this is a tough question, because it's like saying, well, how much money can you make selling a book from a thrift store? And it's like, it could really depend, but on average, what can somebody expect? Like, if they land their first wholesale account, like, maybe you can share some of your successes of people that you've helped or coached. Like, what can people make with an account or a couple accounts, and why is that valuable? Because like, if I buy a book and flip it and make $40, I'm done. But
Right.
do you keep making money from that wholesale account? Like, what do people make on average, like beginners who are going after smaller accounts and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things is, and yes, I do coach, and so I'll share a little bit about that. But one thing I will say is, when I was involved, when I was a beginner student, if you will, what is, and it's always relative, But one of the things I've always noticed is like, man, the resources of what's available now, the course itself of what's available now compared to what it was. And it's just like anything, right? Things get better over time, version 1, version 2, version, what have you. But man, oh man, if I had the stuff I had now that I had that then, I don't, like I said, I'm sitting here not, as some sort of a brainchild or anything. I'm a regular dude. But I guess it's just the evolving and the amount of resources, the amount of kind of guidance you have through the course. It's become so much more, I don't say optimized, but it's so much easier to follow. So to directly answer your question though, is the, so to, I mean, I've coached students who are now coaches. So to kind of give you an idea of a metamorphosis, right? Like
Yeah.
some of them have, I'm in some other masterminds and such, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember, I coached this person at one point, and now they're with me, doing whatever they're doing, but obviously successful just because they're doing these masterminds, and coaching has certain requirements and such. So, there obviously is proof in the pudding, but I think one of the things that I would say from a purchasing and wholesale standpoint. So when I tell students, hey, let's just go for some singles. Let's go for some singles. Don't go for home runs. And what ends up happening is you have to learn your business, right? Like anything else, you've got to learn how to do it. So whether you're thrifting for books, you got to understand what to look for. And then you've got to also understand, okay, you find the book, what do you do then? Right. So there's obviously a multitude of steps and workflows and processes and all that fun stuff that you need to do. But the big takeaway is, there's parameters, there's things that that are in the course to say, hey, if it falls within these parameters, understand that you should, you could ultimately on average make X amount of dollars. And so one of those levers is typically like a product would make you anywhere between $200 to $300 a month in profitability. And that's one product. And so the beauty of this, and this is what happened with me, is you find a brand that you work, that you do wholesale with, right? You get a wholesale account and you find one of those accounts and you get the accounts and all is fine. And then you start to go look and say, okay, hey, here's our wholesale pricing. And you start to review and you find one product. Okay. And when it's all said and done, you're like, wow, I found 5 products, each making me $300 a month, and then you start to roll the kind of these numbers and start to figure out how much money you can actually make. It doesn't seem like a lot, like, oh, okay, I'm going to make on $300, but then, that's like as an example, maybe how you found, right? So if there's a ton of, I'm trying to think of an example, like Coke products. So you've got Coke, Diet Coke, what have you, Coke Zero, all these different Coke products. And you find, okay, Coke is making me $300 a month. Diet Coke's making me $150 a month. Originally I found Coke at $300 because it met the requirements of what I'm searching for, I'm looking for. But then you've got all these other ones. Then you look at it as a totality, right? It's like, okay, well, $300 here, $150 here. Coke Zero is gives me another $100 a month. So you kind of start to figure out how this stuff starts to really gain steam and momentum, where you're like, okay, well, this is just one brand making me $600 a month. It doesn't, like, okay, it's great. But then what about when you find, you get 2, 3, 4 accounts, you can start to see how this stuff kind of compounds. And so, kind of a lot of what you're saying, Steve, as far as books and such, it varies. It absolutely does vary. But what I always tell folks that are starting new or students, is you gotta get your singles in. Don't think you're going to be making $1,000. I'm not saying you won't. I assure you that's not what I'm saying. However, if it's not, let's say you're making $100, a month, that's something, right? So it's all about kind of having that momentum. A little bit of what I was talking about before with building momentum. You might hit a wall, get through it, continue building momentum, and start chipping away. where you're starting to get lots of singles and lots of singles and lots of singles. And then, and through all that, you start to build relationships with these vendors, right? So that's all kind of part of it. And this is all, I guess this is all kind of part of the course, but this is all some of that kind of what I mentioned with you start small and then you start to see how this stuff starts to really amplify once you really get going and just find out that this is a very, this is a numbers game. Like there's products that we buy that, don't even make $50 a month, if that, but it's part of a greater portfolio for that brand where it's like, okay, that's fine. We'll take it. $50 is $50. It's all part of it. We all order, it's coming in, might as well make $50. So it varies, but ultimately it's all about just gaining some momentum.
Yeah. And the confidence as well, I mean, I could imagine, after you land your first wholesale account, maybe it's a small account, maybe it's a small brand, but you build your confidence to know you can do it. You learn how to maybe improve the SEO on the listing. Maybe you help them with their photographs. Maybe you improve the listing. You jump on a call. Now you've talked to somebody, you've got a deal. And now maybe you've even increased their sales a little bit. Maybe you've helped them. You've gone through the process. I could only imagine, David, that on that next phone call with a brand or an email, we'll talk about that, your student or whoever would be so much more confident to be able to sell themselves and help the brand. And it seems like you said, it's the momentum, it's the building of the confidence.
Yeah, 100%. And kind of my, in my buildup when I was at the conference and I was talking about how I left to make, to make calls, when I made if I think about when I made my first call to, when I made my 50th call or whatever that is, like the conversation was completely different because it's like anything else, it's practice. And so to that end, when I talk about singles, right? Okay, well, if I'm making $50, there's probably a pretty good chance where you can learn a lot about how to optimize listings to get that $50 to $100, right? And so then what you do is like, okay, well, I got it from $50 to $100. The account manager or whoever you're working with for that brand is going to be like, hey, I've noticed an uptick in your purchasing. And so through probably some back and forth emails, maybe some calls, that relationship is being forged as time goes on. You're basically submitting these recurring orders. Where you're gonna be like, hey, I've done some things there. I've enhanced the image, or I've added some keywords. All these different components that I've increased sales by 10% for this particular product, which is obviously a 10% increase of purchases and such, right? So that is all feedback you provide and start to build a better rapport and have that relationship that just helps to kind of mitigate and helps you to grow. Where it's like, okay, hey, well, you know what? We have some new products coming out for 2022. We'd be interested in launching some of these new products through you. You've done such a fantastic job with what we have. Would you be interested? And boom, there you go. Now you've got some new products that are, they'll probably help to fund, to advertise, and do all these different things to help grow as part of a business that's trying to sell products, even new products at that. And so now that momentum, and that's why I always talk about like hit your singles, because at the end of the day, you're going to learn. You're going to have to continue to learn. Like if I had a whale of a brand that came to me my first go at it, like I'd fail miserably because I just don't have that experience. So I want to, I'm happy making next to nothing as long as I'm learning. That is worth more than the money I would be making. And then to a point where it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to maybe, look for something else, or I'm going to drop this particular product because it's not making me enough money. And that's only a result of you just gaining more experience and understanding how it kind of all works. But like I said, when it comes to that, it's like, hey, don't try to get your whale in the beginning. Just like I said, hit your singles. I keep saying that, but hit your singles, learn how to do these things as you go through and as you get more experience, which again, was never offered. Like, I don't say it was never offered, but it was never offered. I was never really available. And that it wasn't because it was short-sighted, it's just because it was in its infancy. And so now it's just, the course itself is night and day, with being able to understand how to optimize, how to do these things, how to go back to vendors, how to build those relationships and such.
Nice, man. Very nice. So so this is really interesting, and hopefully, if everyone who's watching is enjoying this and enjoying David's story, be sure to hit that like button, let us know, leave a comment below. And again, if you want to learn more in depth, we'll put some free resources down below. There's a webinar that's coming up. But let me ask you, for the people who are a bit shy, is it required to have to, because I could imagine how nerve-wracking it would be jumping on a call with a brand, jumping on a call and they're asking you all these questions, and maybe you went through the wholesale formula, or you just don't have the actual hands-on experience, and they're asking you all these questions and how to create listings and optimize and do all that. Like, it could seem very, very nerve-wracking for a new person. Is there any way around that? Can you land your first deals just through email without having to go in? And, I've talked about it in other videos. They teach a lot about that in TWF, going in and adding value, putting a lot of upfront, you know, value for them. Is it necessary? Can you do it just email? What are your thoughts on that? I know it's a lot I'm throwing at you.
Yeah, no. This is great. So yeah, as far as, I mean, and I mentioned before, I've not sold a thing, from hey, I'm in sales. I've never dealt with that. I've actually, I'm an engineer by trade. I've literally been at a desk my entire career, behind a computer screen. So, kind of that nervous energy of picking up the phone and calling. So for me, I understood that I needed to do those things in order to be successful. And now I'm saying that because, as I mentioned, starting some time ago versus how it is now is so much different, where you obviously can conduct this all online. And as we know, you know, hindsight's 2020, but we're with the pandemic, everybody is virtual. All these things are happening. So I'm not saying the phone call has been lost in translation, but I can surely tell you that emails, are even more relevant now, right? So yeah. So as far as, like, if you don't want to get on the phone, I got on the phone because I want to talk to somebody. I'm impatient, so I want to talk to someone, and I don't want to wait for an email to come back, a response. Hey, we can set up a call, or we can set up a meeting. Like, I want to get right to it. But that's me, and that's also the wholesale formula circa 6 years ago, 6 years ago. So all of that being said, it's one of those things where things have evolved now, where there's automations and such, and emails. It's all taught as far as how to send off emails, how to, you do your research, and then you just shoot off 50, 100, 150 emails a week to numerous brands and vendors. And then, you start to kind of collaborate from that on the replies and such. So, so I understand the daunting, overwhelming part of the contact. On the other side, as far as like the chops of meaning what you need to know, that again is all kind of part of it. Go for I always tell everybody, get the easy wins. Don't try to, solve a Rubik's cube in 3 minutes, right? Like, don't go overstep what you know. Sure, you can always say, hey, yeah, no, I can do those things, and then you hang up the phone, or whatever the medium is, and then you're like, all right, how am I going to figure this out? There may be moments where that happens, just because it's an opportunity, and so you just like, okay, well, I just need to really figure this out and go for it. But majority of the time, it's definitely going to be one of those things where you're going to ease yourself into it. You're not going to find yourself pressed to say, I need to know this, and this. It's going to be understanding their business, understanding how to kind of get from getting a wholesale list, a price list, and then ordering, and then from ordering, working with Amazon and selling on Amazon, and that kind of that whole life cycle. So that's the part you need to learn first before you start, concerning yourself with, okay, do I need to do this, and this? That absolutely comes in time. It's just a natural progression, and it's definitely not something that, you need to close, hang up the phone or hit send the email and think that you have to expect and promise the world to a brand. It's just not. It's part of the progression. Like I said, it's just one of those things that over time, it naturally kind of adheres itself to things you need to know. But that's, again, under a typical normal progression. And on top of it, there's also opportunities where you don't, you can just, I don't want to learn anything. I have, and I mentioned it before, there was a student who's now, she's not a coach, but she is just wants to be a one-man team, and she wants to hire out everybody, all these experts to do these things for her. And that's what she did. She set out to do. She did not bring anyone in her business besides virtual assistants, folks that kind of do maybe remedial tasks, repetitive tasks. But aside from that, any sort of expertise, anything that you've got to be able to do A, B, C, and D, she's just hired out. And that is a perfectly attainable strategy or
Like hire
model.
out what? Like give an example of something she would hire out, like photography or
Yeah.
like
So
SEO.
so ultimately, and she's, like I mentioned, she's a very successful seller. But in a nutshell, she's the type, just full disclosure, she's the type that would loves to talk, loves to, she's very social, right? But she's not an enthusiast and wanting to learn how to do advertising. She's not, the PPC. She's not in it. She doesn't care on how to find keywords to develop listings. She certainly isn't a photographer. I'm not one either. Most people aren't. So what she does is she just finds opportunities, and where to find those opportunities, those resources are readily available. And basically, hey, I want to find a photographer, and like anything else, it's proven. There's reviews, there's all those things, and I'm just gonna farm out that. I'm gonna farm out how to do advertising. I'm gonna farm out how to do content. I'm not a writer myself. I would not be able to write a persuasive product page for a given listing or product, and be able to convey features and benefits. Like, it's just not my cup of tea.
Who
So
who pays for that, David, when you're working with a brand and you're like improving photographs, the bullet points, helping it to rank better, going through the process, writing copy? Do you pay for that? Do they pay for that? How does that conversation come about?
yeah, no, that's a great question, Stephen. And so that and it gets answered quite a bit, or asked quite a bit, in the sense of like, okay, well, how does this handled? And so much of that is based on kind of where your level of comfort are, both financially, but also where you are with kind of your relationship with this particular brand, let's say. So I tell, because again, if I'm looking to, if I'm talking to a brand and say, and I'm in the model where I'm going to basically farm it all out, right? So, hey, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to write persuasive content for the listing. It's going to cost me, um, X amount of dollars to do photography. And so I'm going to kind of have, let's call this soft budget of what it would cost, an idea, an estimate, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a conversation with the brand, and those conversations can go as follows. One, hey, I'm going to work on this particular product. Just want to let you know, I think it's always good to communicate with a brand and say, hey, my intention is to do these things, as opposed to, kind of taking a shot in the dark and say, oh, by the way, I did this. And the brand maybe, well, we could have done that. We have our own content. Please reach out to me before you make changes. Because ultimately it's their product. It's their, it's not their channel. It's not their own, but they have a sense of ownership, right? So you want to make sure that you have that line of communication going. But what you can do is, as you talk through these things about what you're going to do, and this is, and research will show that it's, doing a simple Google search. If I update the content and the photography, I'm going to see a 10% increase in sales. And that's straight from Amazon. Amazon will say, hey, based on doing these things, you could expect a 10% increase in sales. So I'm going to send over that stat, or I'm going to communicate that stat to the account manager of the brand. And I'm going to be like, are you interested in supporting this, this effort? And they'll reply either one of two ways. They'll say, yeah, we'll go half on it, or, like a co-op, or sure, we'll cover it, just send us the invoice, or give us an idea of what it's going to cost. And then you can kind of line item out what the budget is. Or they can say, no, no, thank you. And then that's when I would reply and say, okay, well, I'm happy to do this, because I value this relationship. So kind of get into the psychology of like, I value this relationship. I'm happy to do that. And then prior to sending that, you've got to kind of make the decision yourself to say, hey, is it going to be worth it to me? Do I think there's maybe some value in this relationship to go and do this, learn this? If it's the first time you're going to learn, working with a consultant or an outsourced so-and-so photographer to see their work as well. That's a part of it, aside from seeing samples and stuff. But you're kind of going to have that new relationship, that new rapport. So that can now become your photographer person if it works out well, right? Like, that's my go-to. I can really blow this thing out and set this thing up, right? To be really kind of me, this one-man show, and all these other folks working and helping me out with their given line of expertise. So again, I'm kind of talking about all things here that you're going to experience. And so that's when you make a decision and say, okay, is my gut, what do I feel? And, maybe something comes of it. Chances are usually something will come of it, because it's nothing but good, 10% increase in sales, all those things. But if I did it, and this, I've been there, done that, where I do these things and it really hasn't worked out, like anything else, like, okay, well, that was an experience. What can I learn from it? What's the good? What's the bad? Right. And then you just kind of move on. And so now, going through all that, I'm now set up to understand how to kind of form a strategy around my discussions with how to do these things with brands. And again, whether that's your own employee or that's farmed out, those are all things that are kind of part of this process of learning and building your business.
Yeah, it's exciting, man. This is really, really fun stuff, and hopefully everybody's enjoying it. We're kind of getting to that time where I want to respect your time. We're getting to about the 46-minute mark, and
Sure.
I want to ask you what final advice would you give to somebody? I know we went through a lot of topics, and we could probably talk for another 3 hours and not scratch the surface.
Right.
But what advice would you give to somebody who's watching this? They've got some experience, maybe selling on eBay and Amazon. They want to take things to the next level. They want to learn about wholesale. They love the fact of consistent income. They love the fact that they're getting invoices. You don't have to worry so much about IP claims and getting kicked off or proof of selling. And, it's just the scalability of it, the semi-passiveness of it. Being able to put in work once, build that relationship and enjoy those benefits long-term. What advice would you give to somebody now who they're just like, man, there's so much to know. There's so much to learn. Like, where do they even start?
Yeah, no, I think, in when I kind of go through my journey, that I'm still in, obviously, but I think the big takeaways of things that I should have done. I would say that the first thing is, I grew really fast in the beginning. And what ended up happening is a lot of what I'm talking about now, where like being a little bit more meticulous and intentional, and baby steps where like I was biting off more than I can chew. And so for me, the lesson there of like what I should have done is better understand things like, and this is like I said, going down a rabbit hole per se in a much larger conversation, but understanding your numbers, right? Understanding, all things involved in what the cost of, like when I mentioned, you make $50 a month. Okay, that's great. But then, there may be some other fees involved. So understanding that. So when you're making decisions on purchasing products and such, so understand your numbers. That's the first thing I would say. And then the other thing I would say is process. Having a process, understanding that there may be a point, or I won't say there will be a point where if you're doing email, let's say email automations, right? So many times people are like, I sent out 50 emails today, or I sent out 300 emails this week. And I've seen it myself on coaching calls, doing the screen share, and their inbox has like 500 unread emails. And those are all vendors getting back to them. And some are like, okay, so some are like, no, this is because of this, whatever it may be. And they're basically drinking from a fire hose. And that's the part where I'm very attuned to, because I had the same situation where I had so much happening that like, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was one of those things where I needed to slow down and really understand and get a process in place. And so to that very reason, it's like you get an inbox full of 500 because you sent out, 2,000 emails the last 2 weeks, right? And then it's like, okay, now where's my, I have all this time that I need to look at to get emails, but then, oh no, I've got to do some order replenishments. Oh no, I got to do, I've got to, there's an issue. I've got to create a support case with Amazon, whatever that may be. But it's not, as you know, like you can turn your day into something massive because you just have 500 unread emails. So I think having a process of how you want to go about it, and hey, here, do this, learn this, understand the how effective a virtual assistant is in helping you with those things, as an example. And again, this is all kind of taught in the class, as I'm sure you're aware, Steve. But ultimately, I think it's knowing your numbers and process. The biggest thing is just getting your process, because then it's now repeatable and you can continue to do it and do it. And then so when you get your 500 emails, you know exactly how to handle it and you can work it and obviously grow your business from that, as opposed to, you did one thing and it worked. Okay, great. Okay, now what? How am I going to be able to have time to do all these things? And then you potentially get overwhelmed, maybe even burned out, right? All these things happen. And then, you start to kind of have a little bit of a level of disgust, and that's not why we're here. We're here to appreciate what we're doing, appreciate this journey, and embrace maybe some of our dreams, right? Maybe embrace things that you wanted to do. Maybe you just embrace some extra cash on the side, whatever that may be. You can't lose sight of that. And so by having a process and understand your numbers, I feel like those are probably the two biggest kind of takeaways for me personally, kind of through my journey at this point, as far as things I wish I did or things I did. And this is why, I've fortunately I'm in the situation I'm in now.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for that advice. And, it's so true. Take things slow, one step at a time.
Yep.
For anyone interested, check out the links below. There'll be information somewhere on this page you could go through some training, read some posts, see if it's a good fit for you, to learn about this. And you can do this on the side. You can do it part-time. You can do it full-time. You can do it small, big. So David, it was really awesome hearing your story and sharing a bunch of tips. And man, I'm really pumped up for you. Thanks for coming on and sharing with us everything. And, congrats on all your success, man. It's crazy how far you've come. And we really appreciate your knowledge and all your advice. So appreciate you. Thank you so much, David. And hopefully we'll get an update from you soon, man, when you hit the $50 million a year mark.
Appreciate it, Steve. Thanks so much for having me. Always very fortunate to be, called on to do some of these interviews and such with you. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much, David. And we'll talk soon, man. Have a great year.
Great. Take care. Same to you.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.